You were CFO of the New York Stock Exchange. By the way, the most meta thing ever to take a stock exchange public. I was thinking about that at breakfast today. I was like, that never really hit, that she took a stock exchange public. That's really cool. Rumor has it the security guards there, it's like Fort Knox there, by the way, to anyone who hasn't been there. It's like going through like the 7 different gates to try to get in. Rumor has the security guards still greet you like royalty. What's the backstory there?
I actually, I think I told you this when we saw each other, that I actually went to an event at the exchange and I realized that I forgot my license. And you can't get into Fort Knox, New York Stock Exchange.
It's worse than the airport if you don't have a license there.
It really is. It really is. First of all, you can't drive up there. There's all these, it's security upon security upon security. And I walked in and I said, I'm really sorry. I forgot my license. And he looked at the security guard, looked at me. He said, hey, you're Amy Butte. Go ahead. And I think that's where this question is coming from. When I arrived, we had many things to do. I think I mentioned previously, we looked at all of our revenue streams and we also looked at our expense structure. The mandate was to understand what would we look like as a public company rather than operating like a not-for-profit company. And we went through all of the expenses. There was a big line item for security guard overtime, right? These were all the guys that had worked for the police and they came to be private security guards and they had a lot of overtime. And so we went and we analyzed, would it be less expensive to hire more guards or to keep them on all the overtime? And we actually realized that we saved more money giving them overtime than hiring more people. There were very good benefits in the day. And because of this, the security guards have probably sent multiple children to college. They've probably taken some really amazing vacations or bought some great cars, all on that overtime. And they still remember that. And what's really fascinating is I didn't appreciate what an impact it made until I went back probably 10 years later. And that's when they really told me, thank you so much for making that decision.
Oh man, that's special. And talk about being like, you said earlier, it's all about the team. Like that's really taking care of your people.
Yeah.
I feel like there's another story in here about your equity days. And so did you meet the CEO of Merrill back in the day when you were a research analyst?
I did.
And how did that go?
So I started my career at Merrill Lynch and then was able to have my own franchise at Bear Stearns. And so when I made that transition from Merrill to Bear, Merrill asked me to pause before initiating coverage on the stock. I mean, these were all my friends. I learned the business through them. They felt like it might have been a little too close to home. So I waited a little bit of time and I started to write my thesis on Merrill. And my thesis on Merrill at the time was they were like fat. Like there were too many layers of management. There was too much spending. They were kind of resting on their laurels. Great company, but kind of resting on their laurels and spending too much. And so Dave Kamansky, the CEO, brings me to his fancy office and sits down with me and tells me over and over again, Amy, we're really committed to being cost effective. We're going to be really efficient with our people. We're going to be really efficient with our marketing spend. You have my word. And I said, thanks, Dave. That's really helpful. And a few minutes later, I walk out and he hands me the biggest bag of swag I think I've ever received. Needless to say, it wasn't a buy rating, but anyway.
Here I am actually thinking that Navam was going to hook me up with some swag I can wear on the pod after, but I guess it probably is smarter to cut some of that out.
Well, we can have a little swag, but it was like a big bag of swag.
I'm picturing you walking out with like a giant like edible arrangement, like a teddy bear or something after that meetup.
Wasn't that bad, but yeah. Okay. He did send me flowers once, though.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay. That is funny, like that people will try to wine and dine the research analysts to get a buy rating out of them. But then you're looking at it like, this is like literally in your cost structure that I'm trying to analyze. All right. We're going to gear towards a close in a second here. But I mean, you've often been the only woman in the room. I'm curious for any other females listening, how it's shaped your mindset on leadership and opportunity.
I grew up on a block of 10 boys and me. So maybe that shaped me. I was never afraid to play baseball with the boys or I guess raise my hand, in a room. I remember when I arrived at the New York Stock Exchange and I had a former executive from JP Morgan come down to go to lunch. Because in those days, there was a lunch club and it was a big deal to get into the building and come to lunch.
Okay.
And halfway through lunch, he said, Amy, the difference between men and women in business right now is that after an important meeting, all the men go to the bathroom and continue the conversation. And the women, there aren't enough to continue the conversation.
Right.
There was actually a CFO by the name of Dina Dublon who talked about the importance of having at least 3 women in the room so that you could continue the conversation in the bathroom. But more importantly, that was critical mass. And a few weeks later, I was finishing my first board meeting at the exchange. And at the break, I went to the ladies' room. And all of a sudden, I realized to the stall to my left was Madeleine Albright, and the stall to my right was Carly Fiorina. And I was like, yeah, I made it.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. It's great perspective to have. So thank you.
But I will also say as a woman in business and a woman in tech, I'm really, really proud of our finance team. The majority of our leadership team is, are women. And I think we set a really great example for people throughout the org and hopefully throughout the industry.
Something we talk about on the show a lot is having like a coaching tree, like basically who is a part of your org over time and what did they develop into. So I bet there are people that come to mind even now who you think like, oh, I was really glad that, I helped them mature in their career.
There is. Actually, Ann Javiscus, who I mentioned, who I worked with at the New York Stock Exchange, and she was the person that I wanted to come with me when I joined Navan. I was like, will you please come and be my partner? And we were just speaking, I think like a week or two ago. And she said, I always remember that first bonus that I got from you. And that was kind of a momentous event. And she's all these years connected that with me in a really positive way. And it changed how she felt about herself and her worth. And she carried that through her career.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.